this sister. I kind of shortened her bio a little bit because y'all wouldn't hear her. Y'all would be just hearing me here talking about her. So I'm going to run down a little bit about who she is. Quite an impressive resume. And she instructed me on the program. It says Dr. Nteri, I believe, Nelson. And she instructed me that I should give her African name, which is Nteri Nelson. And it means the nature revealing harvest to sons and daughters of God. Dr. Nteri is a holistic. I'm going to read her, who she is. Then I'm going to read her formal training. And then I'm going to read her African education. Okay? So Dr. Nteri is a holistic psychotherapist, metaphysician, priestess of Kemet, and teacher of the African origins of ancient wisdom. She is co-founder of the Academy of Kemetic Education, Right Relationship, Right Knowledge, Mod Incorporated, where she teaches an African-centered method of psychological, spiritual, and character development. Wow. Which is underpinned for the history of ancient African Kemet and the diaspora as a way of self-knowledge and healing and health.
Renewing the speeches of those who heard, intergenerational exchanges, good speech, and intellectual warfare for the African mind. And Dr. Jacob Carruthers has said, the rebuilding of our African families, the rescue of our ancestors, the repair of our broken lives are the demands that must be met by each one of us. And I want to focus my talk today on this repair of our broken lives. In my new book, Spirit guided me to take my previous work, Secrets of Race and Consciousness. Said it was too dense, too condensed, and to, like a mathematician, subtract out all the calculations and the permutations and just come to the conclusions. And to put it in a form that would be digestible for young people. Because that's who we really want to reach, is the young. It's for the older generations, intergenerational, but we really want to reach the young folk. It's a subject that I come here before you with some degree of anxiety because it's been a difficult subject, but it's a subject that we must work with and transmute the energies of. The title of my book, it's a synthesis of African cosmology of Kemet, and it's entitled The GoldenSunEggUnCracked. The noon, or the new N word, Negg, the goose goddess who laid the sun egg, the cosmic egg. So we're going to talk about this today because this is the domain in which this subject should be brought up when we talk about good speech and the power, the power of the chemetician and the metaphysician to really transmute the energies, to bring the youth into the noon, or the new N-word. Focusing on this repair of our broken lives. The GoldenSunEggUnCracked, or unbroken. The egg is symbolic of the entire psycho-spiritual journey of unfolding consciousness. And the power and vibe of words and symbols have become gobbled and distorted as the mecha nature made its journey into English. The Mecher are the pictographs and letters which act as oracle to energetically convey the Necheru, or qualities of divinity. And as an African people, we are millions of years old. When we were with the Mecher, the divine speech of the gods, all that we built through the sounding of a word reflected that divinity. And the law of vibration teaches us that words have a vibration, and they may vibrate at a more spiritual or refined level, or they may vibrate at a more coarse, material, and dense level. So when the Mecher were vibrating at this higher spiritual and refined level, this contributed to our greatness as an African people. And as we made our footsteps out of Africa, we populated the world. And as such, the Mecher, the word, speech, symbols, ideas, have gone forth as a language that has journeyed out of Africa also. As the Mecher journeyed out of Africa, it became confused, gobbled, and distorted by its distillation through the English language. If we had infinite time, I could show you symbol after symbol that has been distorted in this journey. You think of all the symbols associated with Christmas and so-called Christmas and so forth and so on, symbol after symbol. As the Mecher went out into English, words were negatively potentized to contribute to our demise as a people. And we began to experience a fragmentation, separativeness, and brokenness in consciousness. Its resultant lower vibratory expression has contributed to the deep psychological pain we must heal so that we may return to the source of our greatness. What we want to do is bring our youth to the most primal N-word. The most primal N-word is the nu, or noon, or the new N-word. We must make these kinds of interventions to wrest our youth from this negative potentizing of words. The noon N-word, in contrast to the colonizing N-word, brings us into understanding a state of unitive consciousness and wholeness symbolized by the GoldenSunEggUnCracked. And I always bring this symbol to my presentations as a symbol of what things look like before things fell apart. The pyramid text teaches us about the status of this egg as it has made its journey. We read, "My nest is not seen," as we teach our youth the African cosmology out of the noon. We read, "My nest is not seen, and I have not broken," read here, "cracked my egg. I am Lord of millions of years. I have made my nest in the utmost part of heaven. I have come down unto the earth of Geb." So we see the journey from heaven to earth and how we needed to maintain the integrity of our heavenly station as we moved on this earthly plane, but what may have happened. As we continue, we read, "In his birth, he says, I am the babe, born as the connecting link betwixt earth and heaven, and as one who does not die the second death. He issues from the disc or from the egg. He is pursued by the Harut reptile, but as he says, his egg remains unpierced by the destroyer. For the egg to remain unpierced means to remain uncracked and unbroken." But as we continue, we read, "Be saved from the attack made against him at the crossing." This indicates that assault on his young divinity is made as soon as he crosses the line on the west in his descent. What happened when we moved into the west? He is then the youngling in the egg and subject to the Harut attack. Here, the dragon lays in wait to devour the young child. Now, as an African people, do we feel like we've been under attack? Yes, we have certainly been under attack. And when we think about the being broken or cracked, our white seen is on some deep psychological level as having cracked the egg. I mean, why on a deep psychological level do we call them crackers? Okay? All right. Now, so we want to help our youth understand what's happening. But we bring them from the noon. We help them to move within the waters, bathe within the waters, to be born anew. Neginging in Metronetia means to destroy or break into pieces. The cracked God egg symbolizes fragmented or broken God consciousness, which Dr. J talked about earlier in some measure. It is the eye that sees. So instead of having the first eye, we have just apartheid. We see a piece and a part of who we are and not our wholeness. The cracked egg is the broken body of Wasur. So our whole story as we move our youth into this African cosmology is to return them to our whole story in this psychological and spiritual journey. It's the result of the descent down the tree of life and the perfect storm in which we now live. So if we are sitting with the toxicity, the pollutant of poor speech, of bad speech, speech that the youth direct all the time, speech that we have directed, that has been directed toward us, speech that we have been directing toward each other. So if we, like that speech, have been bitten by a snake, well, we have certain clear and present options. What are our options? We may lay there and die. Not an option. Is that an option? No. And this is a derivative symbol, the caduceus. It's a derivative of our earlier Kemetic symbols, but the ideation is still there. It's how the Ka succeeds. It's how the Ka spirit takes of the substance of itself to see itself in form. How Ka takes of the substance of itself to have consciousness in form. So we see how we have gone through these different stationings in this journey, both reviled and both glorious, how we are moving in this journey. Second, we may wait for someone to come by and suck the poison out of us. Is that an option? Then we may find the antidote of the serpent and take this medicine. Aha. We must be wise as the wajet. We must be as wise as the serpent. We must learn the application of the medicine. We must titrate back and forth in this healing process to move us through and transmute these energies and redeem. This is too sacred a work to leave in the hands of NAACP. Can they handle that? Why have we left it to them thus far? We know there's no death. We're the ever-coming one. So we know where there's been a so-called death, there must be a renewal and a rebirth. So let's be a part of that process. And what may be medicinal for our youth? Let us find what may be medicinal for them. How do we need to direct our research in this area? We are sitting with the accumulated filth of eons of time now, where even angels fear to tread, but tread we must, clean up and clear up. And yes, the intellectual warfare goes on for the battle of the minds of our youth. And yet, at the same time, we have to be assured that that doesn't become an internal battle among us as scholars. We need to be vigorous with each other in our scholarship, but we can't stay away from subjects that may not be popular. We need to build a bridge, even if it's a tenuous one, through our research and reconnection, and then let it strengthen. Let's translate the Metronetia for ourselves. Let us confer with others who are studied in the Metronetia. Let us learn other African languages so we can do the comparative study. And let us confer with speakers of indigenous African language so that we can be on this correction course in terms of the way we came and whence we return in our resurrection. We need to redirect our youth to the ancient wisdom. And the African cosmology as a way of return. We even need to turn to other languages like Sanskrit, where the Negus is the serpent. It's the name of the full initiate. In this book right here, the book in Sanskrit. So let us go now to this planetary nature we call Geb. And rightfully so. I mean, there have been 3 earthquakes in this past few weeks. Geb is the god of earth. And let us understand Geb, whose body formed, the earth formed his body and was called the house of Geb. And the goose was sacred to Geb, and he was believed to have made his way through the air in its form. The golden goose on the head of Geb is a symbol of fertility, virility, and generativity. Geb and his female counterpart, Nut, produce the great egg. And Geb is called the part of the gods, or the great cackler. In the Kemetic tradition, the divine goose or great cackler laid the cosmic egg. Let us bring our youth to understanding African cosmology. And when we read the scripture, and sometimes he has upon his head a goose, which bird was one of his incarnations. In many places he is called the great cackler, Negg. And he was supposed to have laid the egg from which the world sprang. So this brings us into cosmic genealogy, and we see here Geb and Nut, and you see the perfect symmetry in their poise here, in their coupling, which produces the cosmic egg. And you see how this would be taken, this symbolism would be taken by masonry and used. You see the perfection here in the right triangle, what would later be called the 3, 4, 5 triangle of so-called Pythagoras. Okay, we heard of that? All right. The most primal in word is nu or noon. The noon word, all right? I should get my cistrine here for just to raise up the energy. Hold on a minute. Hold on a minute. 'Cause you know, when you have lunch, take the time. Wake up the energy. Get on that physical plane with a little food, and the blood is not slow, you know, starting to digest, we can get very physical, but we gotta go to the higher realms to take this in. So I'm going to work on you. All right. Okay, so here we are. Let's see what slide I left off on. Okay, so the most primal N-word is nu or noon, the new N-word. Let's bring this to our youth. We read, I came into being from primeval matter, and I appeared under the form of multitudes of things from the beginning. Nothing existed at that time, and it was I who made whatsoever was made. I was alone, and there was no other being who worked with me in that place. I made all the forms under which I appeared by means or out of the God soul which I raised up out of nu, out of a state of ineptness. I found there in nu no place wherein I could stand. I laid a foundation. I made the other things which came into being, which were manifold, and their offspring came into existence from the things to which they gave birth. It was I who emitted Shu, and it was I who emitted Tefnut. And Shu and Tefnut were raised up from out of the nu wherein they had been. So this is the birth of the cosmic sun egg. So within the infinite, eternal, all in all, the Aman, the fount of all possibility, the black, the deep, the noon, the waters of space, there is a stirring, and the great breath thrills within the waters of noon, raising the fire of Ra, which begins to circumgyrate within the surface of the noon, giving birth to the children of Shu and Tefnut, which are the centripetal and the centrifugal forces in nature. And as the circumgyration within the waters of noon continues, there raises a mound within the waters of noon in this play and display between Shu and Tefnut. And as that fire continues in its circumgyration, one flame shoots high above all others, and in one solitary ray takes aim and pierces and penetrates the mound, fecundating the cosmic egg, the universe. An explosion of light. This is called by various names. The universal Ba, the world egg, the world soul, the cosmic egg, the cosmic sun. It's called the Eye of Ra, the Eye of Ra rising upon the waters of noon. It's called Nginga. Dr. Fukuyao talks about the seed. So as the sun, it was the sun in the egg in Kemet, it became the seed in Congo. So this dance of the twin forces of Shu and Tefnut enable the coming into manifestation of myriad life forms. And from this cosmic egg, all worlds, all creation arise. So we see the arising of super galaxies, constellations, suns, planets, moons, and ultimately Earth, and man, and tiniest atom. All of these are Ba. So there is Ba that is tiniest atom, there is Ba that is universal, Ba in total, and there is everything in between. So there is Ba within Ba within Ba, there is egg within egg within egg, there is I within I within I, and there is seed within seed within seed. So on our planetary level, we can then locate Geb as the being that is ensouling our Earth on our local planetary level. And the goose eggs symbolize the birth of humanity, not only humanity, but the individual and collective consciousness of humanity. Geb is one of the company of the gods who watched the weighing of the heart of the deceased in the judgment hall of Wasur. And on his brow rested the secret gates which were closed by the balance of Ra and which were guarded by the god himself. The righteous who were provided with the necessary words of power were enabled to make their escape from the earth wherein their bodies were laid, but the wicked were held fast by Geb. So there's what we need to do in terms of this collective consciousness and this putting ourselves back together again. We see from the scripture that the care of the egg is important. It says here, I am the egg which dwelt in the great cackler. I keep ward over the great place which Geb hath proclaimed on earth. I live, it liveth. I grow up, I live, I snuff the air. In other words, if we take care of the earth, we take care of ourselves. So the egg is diminished or enhanced by the degree of its safeguarding. Unlike the material nest egg, we may try to protect in guarding our wealth, money, or physical well-being. Geb is how we are guarding our spiritual wealth in developing the nest egg of wisdom or the all-seeing eye. It is the sun in each of us. This is initiation. Let us bring our youth into these kinds of initiations instead of their gang initiations. Let them understand what it means to develop this planetary consciousness. Our ancestors knew of the 7 planes of consciousness and how we make our ascent from the planes the most physical plane, like taking an elevator ride up through the spiritual plane. But the idea is no matter what floor we were on, it was to remember our spiritual or mooring. We fall apart when we are on this physical plane and we forget our spiritual mooring. It was called the Negg, or the bull, or the four-horned bull of heaven, who made this ascent. And Negg also means to cackle. We are then wise and unbroken when we maintain the integrity of the Negg or egg and what psychology later would call the ego. The world egg. It can be maintained in this optimal spiritual state or in a more materially debased state. And this has to do with our word, our speech, how people are speaking about us and what we are speaking. We are evolving the planetary mind as symbolized by the sun god egg. In other words, what is our work? We are evolving the planetary mind symbolized by the sun god egg. We are evolving to be conscious as the god, or the Neteru Geb is conscious. And what is the Neteru Geb conscious of? Conscious of the care of all of the kingdoms. The physical the mineral kingdom, the vegetable kingdom. We are trying to be conscious as stewards of the mineral, the vegetable, the animal, and the human kingdom, and the spiritual kingdom. These are the names that are given for this Neteru Geb. Negg, 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 Ging. So there's much work to be done to understand what these words mean and where they are coming from. But we start from the noon and we work our way in understanding which way to go. Negg means to cackle. Geb is the great cackler. And the cackler means to start time, similar to the rooster in the morning who cackles and arouses one from slumber. Geb arouses us into this space-time continuum which we measure up in being fully conscious of the one true self that we are. But we've gone out on this game of hide and go seek. And from our high spiritual mooring, we extended a seeming self that went out and hid. And then we counted 1, 2, 3, some finite number. And as the one self urges the other seeming self to return, the hiding self is stimulated to return and touch Goose. Aha. So we have to remember what the game is. Okay. All right. So let me just, I'm getting my signs here. All right. So just, so let me just say this. All of this is about return. You see the Sankofa, the boomerang, the Niger River. All of these are about return. My book is about reconnecting, especially our youth, with the African cosmology in history. It's about stirring revelation, deep thought, and resurrection out of the quagmire of confusion about words that have been used to describe, enslave, rob, and kill the black man and black woman. It reveals the spiritual and psychological journey of unfolding consciousness, the African cosmology of Kemet, the sacredness of the cosmic sun egg, and differentiates higher spiritual meaning of the new N-word from the colonizing N-word. It retraces and ferrets out and dispels word meaning. It helps to dissipate the power to wound that the N-word has had as Medunetia have gone out into English. And it points the way toward healing so that we may return to the source of our greatness. It helps to teach youth how to wordsmith word meaning at both lower and higher spirals of vibration and dispel illusion so that we may reclaim and use power at its most optimal and divine spiritual level of vibration. And finally, as African and African diaspora, the new N word is a pathway to understanding the resurrection of ourselves from the devastating impact and concentrated pollutant of the colonizing N-word. As we ungarble the new N-word and see the probable distortion of an ancient harmonic, our footsteps retrace a path deep within our African cosmology and cosmogenesis. We thereby reconnect ourselves, particularly our youth, with that which rings true to our story, our healing in our mother Africa. Through this reconnection, the resurrection of the Medu Neter, as inextricably linked with our own, is revealed.